Over 60 churches burnt down in Canada over the past couple of years. Pastor Hildebrandt in Ontario was fined over $250,000, and Pastor Pawlowski in Alberta has been thrown in jail multiple times. And just this week, we're seeing a Catholic high school student arrested for saying that there's only two genders. Who is standing up for Christians in Canada? Our conservative politicians? Artur Pawlowski joins me tonight to have this conversation, and it starts right now.
I promise you, I will not let you down.
The trucks parked outside illegally should move.
Canada's Conservatives will meet our Paris climate commitment.
Enough with the woke. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I take that back.
To champion our conservative principles.
We are the party of law and order.
To call in the auditors. We haven't yet decided whether we're going to call for the government to impose a mandatory test or vaccination.
And we will win the next election. Canada must not ignore the reality of climate change.
Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Controlled Opposition, Episode 6. With me is a very, very special guest. This man has lived under communism in Poland in the 1980s. He moved to Canada, became a successful businessman, later decided to dedicate his life to God and Jesus Christ. He's been feeding the homeless in Calgary for over 20 years. He fought the lockdowns to keep his church open. He's been dragged off to jail multiple times. Now this evil regime in Canada is trying to criminalize his speech. He is easily one of the biggest political prisoners in Canada today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Polish powerhouse himself, Pastor Artur Pawlowski. Thanks so much for being on the show, Artur. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Thank you so much, Greg, for having me on your show. Well, you have a very interesting name, Controlled Opposition. So I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Yes, absolutely. So last episode on Controlled Opposition, I covered your story, and notably how Danielle Smith kind of backed away. You may have remembered she made this comment about, I'm going to stand up for the people who are persecuted unlawfully with COVID measures. She mentioned pastors specifically, almost giving a nod to you, as it were. And then she kind of slowly but surely backtracked. I covered that in the last episode, and I was left with the question, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for conservative politicians to stand up for Christians, and specifically you getting thrown in jail for no good reason? So I thought, how about let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just get right to it, Artur. How do you answer that question? Why do you think it is so hard for these conservative politicians to stand up for you?
Actually, it's not hard at all if they were truly conservative, but we know that they're not. That's the problem. So if you're really standing for freedom, if you are actually representing the people that elected you on certain promises, then it's not hard at all. However, let's look at this whole, flip-flopping political pancake called Danielle Smith. I mean, I worked with her during the Wildrose 1.0 when she built the momentum with all of us, and then suddenly, for some promises of becoming the deputy premier, she abandons us and walks to the other side and walks to the enemy and leaving us, leaderless. I mean, it was absolutely crazy treachery at the highest levels. And then a few years later, well, she was greatly rewarded for that treachery, and she becomes the radio host, QR77. And for years, she is learning how to manipulate, how to talk, how to deceive people, and for the people to believe that she's truly a conservative candidate. Of course, during the COVID tyranny, we bled on the streets, we marched, we risked arrests, we received tickets after tickets. Myself, I became the first Canadian to receive a COVID ticket, and then I was charged over 40 times. Where was Danielle Smith during that time? Where was Pierre Trudeau during that time? Well, nowhere to be found. While we were dying, bleeding, standing for real Canadians that their businesses were shut down, their loved ones were dying, and they could not even see them. Those heroes of today, those new saviors of either Alberta or Canada, were nowhere to be found. So if they were really truly conservative leaders, that amnesty, it's a very easy thing, because that's what we're talking here about. Danielle Smith campaigned on the simple promises, and she barely won because people like us voted for her because people believe that she's going to actually keep her promises. She barely wins. And what does she do? The first thing? Well, the first thing she does, she appoints the same villains, the same Gestapo, the same SS or Nazis, if you will, back into the cabinet position. So you've got Travis Taves. He was the Minister of Finance under the Kenney regime. He's back in his office. We're talking about Casey Madu. During that time, as the Minister of Justice, he made his famous statement that this whole COVID lockdowns and mandates had nothing to do with science or keeping us safe, but it was all about power and control. Well, let's talk about Tyler Shandro. During the Kenney's regime, he was the Minister of Health. That's the man that was responsible for shutting us down, invading our places of worship, and the destruction of Alberta's economy. What does Danielle Smith do? She appoints him to be the next Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. That's the level of insanity. It's like in 1945, appointing the Nazi ministers like Goebbels and Goering back into power, saying, okay, now you boys fix Germany and make sure that the Jewish people are rewarded for what you have done, or recompensated for what you have done to them. That's the level of craziness we're talking about. Today, I listened to Danielle Smith media scrum, and she says, well, I asked my Minister of Justice, and he told me there is nothing that can be done. Obviously, there is nothing that cannot be done according to him, because he is the man that arrested me. He is the man that sent, SWAT team to my church. He's the man that kept me in metal cages, solitary confinement, psych ward, and in max spot for the most dangerous terrorists in the province of Alberta. So obviously, this man is not going to have any solutions to this problem, because he brought the tyranny in the first place. I mean, this is crazy stuff that we are witnessing in front of our eyes. So Danielle Smith, the easiest way to deal with this problem was, she has the majority government. She could do pass a bill of amnesty. She could bring a bill to the legislation and say, hey, from now on, we are not only going to, we're not going to bring amnesty only for those that were charged and arrested and persecuted and prosecuted during the time, but we're also going to make sure that this never happens again. Why it's not done? For a very simple reason, because the people that did this to us are still in power. So it's like a hydra. You cut one head off, another one is still in place, and that's what we're dealing. The UCP government is a highly corrupted government that is forwarding this globalistic tyranny. They're no different than the Liberals and the NDPs. That's why.
Yeah. And you are joining the Independence Party of Alberta as well. And you're kind of, taking things into your own hands, as it were. You are no stranger, though, to when it comes to kind of unjust persecution, right? Like, you've been feeding the homeless for over 20 years in Calgary. I watched your documentary, not your documentary, but The Street Advocate. It's on YouTube. It's a very great documentary. And there's one specific part in the documentary where you say, I started feeding the homeless. Things were going well. The media liked us. The politicians liked us. And then something happened. Something changed, and they started to persecute you. And, they spent, if I'm not mistaken, millions of dollars just on persecuting you. And, so you've seen a larger kind of spectrum of this sort of, unlawful behavior of politicians saying one thing and doing another. Has there been any good politicians over the years? And, tell me more about, has this kind of pattern changed when it comes to these politicians, constantly not standing up for you, or constantly, not celebrating and championing a Christian pastor like yourself?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that this just did not happen during the COVID tyranny. This implementation of tyranny started decades ago. Indoctrination of our children and corruption at the highest levels. I remember when we emigrated here, my introduction to Canadian politics was with Chrétien, and I don't know if you remember, but $1 billion disappeared from the federal coffers. And I remember the mainstream media would go to the prime minister of the country asking, Mr. Prime Minister, what happened to $1 billion that disappeared? And he would look at the cameras and says, I do not know. Ask the Minister of Finance. So they run to the Minister of Finance and they ask him the same questions. And he looks at the camera and says, I don't know, ask the Prime Minister. And nothing, of course, happened. Those people are not accountable. There are no checks and balances. They can get away with murder, and they do right now. During my ordeal, I was arrested 16 times, over 100 court cases, 340 citations so far for just simply being a pastor. This is a very anti-Christian government, and I'm not talking just the federal government. I'm talking about provincial and municipal governments at every level. They hate feeding the poor. They hate anyone that dares to bring hope to the hopeless, because this is a competition during communism, socialism, fascism, hybrid, as we are experiencing right now. They hate the idea of competition. You see, they want to be the modern day gods. They want to be the modern day pharaohs. And anyone that stands and says, hey, wait a second, there's actually a living God and you're not him, well, they have to do everything in their power to destroy that. And you got to remember, I grew up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the Soviets in a godless environment where communists, of course, and socialists do not believe in God. They want you to worship the state. So when you do not worship the state, when the state tells you do something and you choose not to because you believe in a higher power, you believe in God, you believe in the Bible, well, then you become the enemy of the state. And that's exactly what happened to me. During that time, 20 years ago, I found some good politicians. They were still good, decent politicians. One of them, Rob Anders. He would come to open marches for Jesus. He would come to feed the poor. He was a member of parliament for 18 years. And I remember having conversations with him, and it was him that told me how bad it is in the federal government, what is happening in the parliament, how evil and perverted the whole system has become. And of course, the provincial government is no better, and municipal government is no better at all. Do you know that there is actually laws on the books right now in the bylaws that prohibits you to feed the poor? So for example, if you give a child a sandwich to a dying child on the streets of our cities, there is a law in the books that says giving free goods and services is prohibited by law, and you can go to prison for that. Do you know that there is a law that says giving printed material is also against the bylaw, which of course is targeting Bibles and gospel tracts? That's how evil this politicians or this political arena has become. Do you know that we used to have a prayer at our city halls and legislatures and in parliament? Well, all of that has been kicked out because they hate the competition. They don't want anyone to be able to remind them that there is actually accountability, that there is a living God that watches and knows it all and knows what they do when they think no one is paying attention. So yeah, they were few through the years, but now, I mean, look at my trial. This trial just a few days ago for my sermon to the trackers in Coutts a year ago, when I told them, stand up for your God and state-given rights, do it peacefully. I reminded them about solidarity movement, non-compliance. When I told them, hey, whose land is this? It's not just the elected politicians, but it's yours. So stand up and fight for your children, but do it peacefully. And my trial was last Thursday. Do you know how many MLAs or MPs showed up? 0. Not even one. Not one. So we do not have conservative government. And if people still believe that we have a conservative government, you are delusional. You're completely lost your mind. You have no idea what's really going on. The liberals, the NDP crazy people, socialists and communists, and treacherous conservatives or so-called conservatives are not serving us anymore. They're serving the globalistic agenda, net zero, you will own nothing, you will be eating crickets, riding a bicycle in -40, and you will be happy. While at the same time, we saw all those people, so-called conservatives, flying private jets in Davos, over 1,000 private jets, riding SUVs and eating Japanese steaks, while they're telling you you will own nothing and you will be happy. So if you don't see that, if you don't see what they're doing, if you actually believe a person that wants to pretend I'm a savior of Alberta, I'm a freedom fighter, but yet was not willing even to lose her job, I'm talking about Danielle Smith, then you're blind and you're deaf. And you just want to believe your lie because it suits you agenda. You just don't care about what is going to happen to our beloved Alberta and what kind of a country we're going to have when we're going to move on and give it to our children and our grandchildren. The same people that did this to us are still doing this to us. They just pretend that they're better. It's like a game of I'm a bad cop and a good cop. You know, the game of the bad cop and the good cop.
Yeah, two wings of the same bird, and that's exactly why I started the show Controlled Opposition, because that's how I feel. These Canadians, I'm sorry, are delusional if they think that this Conservative Party is actually conservative. If you think that this Conservative Party is actually fighting for you, and the whole premise really is, in many ways, I think the lies that are told by the Conservative Party is actually a lot more worse and nefarious, because at least the Liberals, we kind of know where they stand. They clearly don't like Christianity. They have their own crazy kind of woke religion going on. They hate you, Artur Pawlowski. They hate everything you stand for, and they're pretty open about that. They've even said it, do we tolerate these people? But the conservative lie gives us this false hope, right? Oh, no, don't worry. I'm fighting for you. I'm going to fight for you. Let's talk about the Conservative Party for a minute. Do you trust Pierre Poilievre, and how do you think we can better influence these Conservative MPs to better represent the people, or do you think we should have to start from scratch?
We must start from the scratch. I mean, there is nothing worse than a dagger of a friend, because I can face the NDP crazy people, the communists, the socialists. I can face the liberal Nazis, and at least, just like you said, at least you know what they stand for. They're in your face. It's a known enemy. It's easier to deal with a person that actually is not hiding how much they hate you. But when you're dealing with the people that pretend they're good and they're stabbing you in the back every time you're not watching, that's worse than any other army that there is out there. And people, for whatever reason, they want to believe that the Conservative Party is still good. They're talking about Pierre, false hope. They're talking about Danielle Smith. But now let's talk about them just for a second. So we had the greatest test in this land in the past few years. I mean, I don't remember in the history of this country a greater test than what happened under the COVID tyranny. And where was Danielle Smith? How do you know who an individual is? The Bible is very clear, of course. As a pastor, I go back to the Word of God, and it says, you shall know them by their fruits, right? It's a very simple test. You don't have to be very smart. You don't have to have PhD to understand that that tree will give you either a good or a bad fruit. So let's look at Danielle Smith as a tree. What kind of fruits we have seen so far? Where was she when we were marching on the streets of our cities, bleeding, being ticketed and arrested? Well, she was not there. Was she allowing on her show freedom fighters like me and others to talk about the movement? No, she did not. Well, did she risk her life or her career for the fight of freedom? No, she did not. Well, it was convenient for her, she walked away from the station so she can run for the political office because she is a career politician. You know what that means? That means she will do everything in her power to stay in power. So if today freedom is popular, she will be your freedom lady. If homosexuality is popular tomorrow, she will be marching with the homosexuals. By the way, she marches with homosexuals every single year faithfully. She stands for abortion. And I'm thinking to myself, how conservative that is. I mean, there is no difference between so-called conservatives today and the rest of the parties. There's no difference whatsoever. We had more deaths generated by the Conservative Party than by the NDP during the previous regime. I mean, that's how crazy it is. Now let's talk about Pierre. And I want to be upfront with everyone. There are certain things that those people say that I like. There's certain things that they do that I agree with. And I wish that they were all the way conservatives, but they are not. So let's talk about Pierre. Where was Pierre when the people were bleeding in Ottawa, begging for any politician to come and help them? Nowhere to be found. Where was Pierre during the times when the people needed him the most? What is the fruit of that man? Now he's yapping and talking about freedoms, but it's all a show. It's all a game to become the next prime minister. So he has an opportunity to fool the nation of telling everyone I'm the good guy and I'm opposite to Justin Trudeau. But the truth is they're using this to become to get into power. And Danielle Smith is doing exactly the same thing. Trudeau has been popular. People got sick and tired of the tyrants. They removed the head. She joins the party, and now she talks the talk. She talks the freedom. But there's no substance. So the first few months of Danielle Smith regime, she did not keep her promises. She did not bring the amnesty, and I told you already how easy she could do that by passing a law, a bill, a legislation. She appoints the same villains that did this to us in the first place. They're still in power. Sovereignty Act, she passed within an hour, so she can do amnesty law. She can pass that within an hour. And Sovereignty Act, what is this doing to us? Why the oil is not being dug? Why our energy industry is not revived? Why the protections are not happening? Why? Because she's getting ready for the next election, and she knows that she wants everyone. So she wants to be good with God, and she wants to be good to the devil. Well, the problem is you cannot have both ways. You cannot pretend I am for freedom and yet keep pastors in jail and under the gun of another trial. You cannot have it both ways.
Yeah, and to extend that biblical analogy of, what fruits do they bear, I think we need to clarify the difference between what they say and what they actually do. Because as you mentioned, they are good at kind of giving these breadcrumbs to freedom fighters, giving these breadcrumbs to true conservatives. But then if you look at the actual actions, it's really not there. And sometimes at its worst, it's a whole bunch of, why are you sounding exactly like Justin Trudeau? Why are you sounding, you're all about these UN agenda items. Like we've played before on the show, a clip of Pierre Pawlowski talking about a zero carbon future. And it's like, is this really our guy? This is supposed to be our guy, our opposing Justin Trudeau guy. I don't buy it. But let's play a quick clip from, I'm going to juxtapose a couple clips here. Let's first hear this one from Pierre Pawlowski talking about how he doesn't like rage and he doesn't like the flags.
I don't like the flags, and I don't like rage. But I think we have to ask ourselves, why are people so angry? Like, why are people so angry? Sure, let's tell people to be more civil, but let's, as political leaders, let's actually try to solve the problems that have upset and angered and hurt people so badly. It is our job to turn that hurt into hope.
Okay, so he's, people are angry, but he doesn't want people to be angry. Be less angry. Be less angry, I guess. It's people are upset. But I just wanted to juxtapose that. What would have happened in this situation if he took your advice?
Out! 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 Out of this property! Immediately out! Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this property, immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out! Out! Out of this property, you Nazis! Out! Out! Gestapo is not allowed here.
And I really love that clip. It pumps me up. I love to watch it every morning. It pumps me up. And I'm just thinking, in that scenario, when you have the Stasi, you have this police unlawfully breaking into your church unannounced, what did you use to defend yourself? You used righteous anger. If I'm not mistaken, that's what I saw in that clip. You're using your righteous anger to tell them to F off. And, how does it make you feel to see a clip from Pierre Poilievre to say like, yeah, well, I don't really like rage. Guys, don't be so emotional all the time. I mean, how would you respond to that, Artur?
It's like saying to the Jewish people in 1945, don't be angry what the government did to you. Just don't be angry. Like after all, the war is over and let's just move on and forget about everything. We got to understand that justice demands restitution. And when you see evil, just for your listeners, what those officers did entering our church, they broke the Criminal Code of Canada, section 176, 1, 2, and 3, and they were liable of up to 2 years of imprisonment themselves for what they did. So when an average Canadian is watching the authorities breaking the law left and right, one law for me, a totally different law for thee, when they arrest pastors in the middle of the highway and then they party at the Sky Palace, hypocrisy with their ministers, like ministers that we have right now. So Tyler Shandro, the very minister that was the Minister of Health and was appointed by Daniel Smith, this savior of Alberta, Daniel Smith, she appoints him to be the Minister of Justice without justice. And Solicitor General, the very man that partied with his previous boss and other ministers like Travis Taves, and yet he had no problem arresting pastors for the very thing that he was doing. Actually, no, he was partying. I was just keeping the church open. Well, that makes you mad. That makes you angry. And there is something like this, like you said, a righteous anger. So Pierre, again, he's speaking from the elite's point of view. Don't make me uncomfortable by the use of your politically incorrect banners and politically incorrect, flags. And please don't raise your voice. Well, listen, you devil, you pathological liar, you evil, wicked man. People are dying. People could not see their loved ones when they were dying because of you. You were in power, you were in government, and you allowed this to happen. You did not speak for the people that were dying. The government enslaved the entire population. We couldn't fly, we couldn't move. In some provinces, you could not go from one place to another. And you did that, Pierre. You were in power while this was happening. And somehow it's like appointing Goebbels back into power because Hitler is dead. So now let's just have the Nazi high-ranking officers in power. Let's together rebuild Germany for the Jewish people and for the whole world. This is insanity at the highest levels. So my answer to him is very simple. Let me take away everything you have, your home, your job, your pension, and your money, and we will see if you're not going to raise your voice. I would like to see him being subjected to what we, the slaves, the modern day slaves, because that's how they treat us. They treat us like we're stupid and we're just simply slaves. You know what a good slave does? Keeps his mouth shut, put the muzzle on, and do not raise your voice. Pierre plays the game against Trudeau, a bad cop and good cop, because he wants to be in power. He's no better and no different. Just like Stephen Harper was viewed as this great man. It was Stephen Harper that opened the door to WEF. It was him that brought this craziness upon Canadians. It was the Conservative government and the leader that so many people adored and loved. It was not Justin Trudeau that did this to us. It was Stephen Harper that did this to us, and his minion, the devil, Jason Kenney, that enslaved the entire province of Alberta, 4.5 million Albertans. So open your eyes and start understanding what's really going on in front of your eyes. It's a game. They're playing you for a fool. It's a flip-flopping game of pretendee. Trudeau has so much hate right now, so they need to replace him with someone that sounds better and feels better and looks better, but they will still keep implementing their final solution, if you will. What is Pierre talking about? Net zero. You know what that will do to Canada? Our natural resources are going to be wiped out. Our power, our strength. Why he is not saying this to Saudi Arabia? Why they are not destroying Saudi Arabia's oil? Why they have to attack our oil?
Great
I mean,
point.
it's a simple question, right? They're talking about ethical oil. Ethical oil. There is nowhere on earth more ethical oil than in Alberta. In Saudi Arabia, they're throwing people off the buildings. They treat women lesser than cows. You're talking about ethical oil? You're talking about supporting evil regime? While taking oil from Saudi Arabia is supporting evil. Alberta protects everyone's rights. Here, you can be whatever you want to be. And I said that so many times as a pastor. I don't want to know what you do in your bed. Just don't bring it into the open. Don't march naked in the front of our children. Why would you want to do that? You can sleep with a donkey in this country if you want to.
And there's so many things that these fake conservatives could be capitalizing on. Mentioning the Saudi oil is a great example. I've seen it happen here and there, but really there are so many things to get people excited, to get Canadians excited if they truly wanted to win, if they were truly conservative and they truly wanted to oppose the Trudeau regime. And I've really changed my perspective, Artur. I used to think that, and for the audience, I haven't mentioned this yet. I've kind of had a little kind of perspective shift. I don't think this Conservative Party is saying these things to just kind of pander to freedom fighters or to conservatives. Like when they say these things like, we're going to give you amnesty. I don't actually think it's about pandering to us. I think they're actually doing everything they can to keep us on the couch. I think it's all about placating. It's all about pacifying. So they kind of gauge what they're going to say based on how excited people are getting. And a great example, of course, was the trucker convoy. And that's when Pierre showed up to be like, hey, here's a pacifier. Here's a lollipop. Yeah, we're going to be the most free ever. We're going to do all those things for you. Everybody just calm down, everybody. And if you look at it, it's basically where they were before the convoy. It's the same sort of milquetoast Conservative Party, not really doing too much, not really doing much more than talking about the price of milk, as we've brought up many times on the show. But I do want to get into the current trial you're going through. It's my understanding that a lot of your previous COVID charges have been dropped. Is that true? That they kind of like just dropped all that, or?
Well, partially. Many of them I won, so the judges have found me not guilty, so I had to go through the trial. I had to go through the witnesses and testimonies and submissions. They would take me through the ringer all the way. Sometimes the charges were withdrawn, and sometimes they would take me through the trial, and then they would stay the charges. So the game, it's a big game, and the doors are huge. And sometimes, for example, just give you this example, how evil the Crown prosecutors are, how corrupted the justice or so-called justice system in the province of Alberta is under the leadership of Danielle Smith, and of course the so-called Minister of Justice, Tyler Shandro, the SS Gestapo evil man that murdered people in the province of Alberta during the lockdowns. So, for example, before Christmas, I was charged 2 years ago for feeding the homeless. So we went to trial. 2 years later, I'm sitting in front of the judge. The judge is listening to many witnesses. And then suddenly, 4 p.m., just the day before the next day in trial, my lawyer receives hundreds of documents as a new disclosure. Of course, you cannot do that, but that's what happened. So my lawyer stays all night to get prepared for the next day. And so wasting 10 hours, so $6,000, of fees just to be prepared for the next day. And then the Crown prosecutor shows up and says, oh, by the way, we're not proceeding, we're staying the charges. Those types of games they're playing all the time. For example, Stephen Johnston, that pathological liar, Crown prosecutor from a special prosecutor unit, like a special SS of today, Stephen Johnston, remember that name. This guy lied so many times to the judge, it's not funny. He lied about my vehicle. He lied about what I said. He lied about saying that I cost Canadian economy over $400 million worth of damages. I mean, he's a pathological liar. He comes before Christmas and drops on the lap of my defense team. So I have now criminal lawyers and civil lawyers, and he drops over 1,000-page documents and hundreds of hours of testimonies. And now my lawyers are spending a month coming through all of this, trying to find out what is this guy trying to do. I mean, he had a year in advance to bring disclosures. He didn't do it. And now suddenly before the trial, he dumps all of that. My lawyers are coming through it. They had to hire extra lawyers. And then when they finally went through everything, he says, oh, by the way, I'm not going to use this at all. Oops, ha, wow. You know, like some kind of a sick game, like a joke, to just waste $100,000 for us, just to hurt us. That's what those people do. And he did not even call one witness, even though he has given thousands of pages of disclosure and witnesses and statements and RCMP recordings. He did not call any of it. Nothing. The only purpose that he had to do that was to frustrate our defense, was to confuse our lawyers, was to waste our monies. So that's what we are dealing with. We're dealing with corruption at the highest level. We're dealing with treachery. Those people should be charged with treason, all of them. And Danielle Smith, your new savior of Alberta, she keeps those evil, wicked people in the position of the highest authority in the land. How can we talk about justice when the same people that did this to us are still in power? It's like talking to the Nazis in 1945, trying to reason with them the murdering of the Jewish people and wiping out tens of millions of lives was a bad thing. It's not going to happen because they believed in that ideology. So Travis Taves, Tyler Shandro, Copping, Casey Madhu, those people, they believe in this because they truly believe they're the elites, they're the pharaohs, and you're the slaves. They can party in the Sky Palace. You cannot have a church. You cannot visit your grandma when she's dying. You cannot have your brother for coffee because you are simply just a slave. That's the problem that I don't understand why people do not see that. And in May, so many people think that just voting the Conservatives back into the power is going to save them. While I'm trying to tell them, listen, you cannot settle for the lesser of two evils because evil is still evil. It's like my brother David says, it's like voting for what? You've got scorpion, poisonous, you've got the viper, and you got the snake. They're all poisonous. Some will kill you a little bit slower, but they all are deadly. You cannot keep doing the same thing, thinking that the result is going to be different. That's why I joined the Independence Party of Alberta, because I want people that are our neighbors to be the next politicians, not career politicians. I want the nurses that lost their jobs to run for office. I want the firefighters that loved people, were risking their lives, and they were booted because they would not take the job. I want the teachers that were kicked out from schools to be reinstated. I want justice to enter our land again, and justice demands retribution. Justice demands that at least some of those people will be charged with crimes against humanity.
I can't even imagine how little faith you have left in the justice system. And it's hard too, right? Because we do have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's supposed to mean something. These laws are supposed to mean something. And then when somebody like yourself, who's getting picked on probably more than anybody in the country, gets it's a completely stacked deck against you, completely tilted tables. But I think you're right. I think we do need to start from scratch. But I do want to bring up let's get to the next. You were just talking about the COVID charges, right? This isn't even the current charges that you're dealing with now. Pawlowski has pleaded not guilty to mischief and breaching a release order, as well as a charge under the Alberta Critical Infrastructure Defence Act of willfully damaging or destroying essential infrastructure. Artur, I know you can really give a good sermon. But did your words actually disrupt and destroy infrastructure somehow? I know you have a deep voice, but oh my God.
I know. When I read that at the very beginning, I could not believe it. Like, my God, I didn't know I am so powerful. I mean, like a Superman or Spider-Man of some sort. What did I say to the people? Well, I told them to do it peacefully. I told them to stand up for the God and state-given rights. I told them no guns, no swords. I gave them a little bit of a history that I saw with my own eyes with Lech Wałęsa.
We can actually, I can play a great clip from it right here if you'd like. This speech, this sermon is, the Crown is trying to say this was criminal. So let's just play a clip from it right here.
Now we have a moment in the history of our beloved country for them to deal with the Trudeau Castros and traitors Kennys. It's about time for Canadians to rise up and start roaring.
Let's go!
I'm talking about peaceful resolution. I'm not talking about guns and swords. They've done this to me for the past 2 years. I was the first Canadian to be ticketed with the COVID tickets in March of 2020. And yet I'm still standing in front of you. 15 arrests, 100 court cases, 340 citations, and I'm still standing in front of you. How come? Because our God is bigger than their God. Because we stand on the right side of history. Because we are doing what is right and just. We are doing this for our children. Look at this girl here. Look at her eyes. What kind of a nation she's going to have in a few years? That's up to you, every one of you. You are deciding today what kind of Canada is going to be for her. You see, my people, in my country, in 1980, finally they said our children are worth fighting for.
So powerful, so powerful. And, you know, when I watch someone like yourself speak, when I watch somebody like another political dissident in Canada, Jeremy McKenzie, he delivers amazing speeches as well. Whenever I see powerful men like you two speak, I think to myself, man, wouldn't it be great if this guy was an actual politician who could like pull the levers of power in this country? But unfortunately, they're the people who you're getting targeted and thrown in jail for simply giving an inspiring speech like that, complete with referencing, you know, communist Poland. And it's like, you know, as a Canadian, it's so disheartening that this is not being celebrated or championed by conservative politicians. Once again, it's completely unbelievable. Leaves me speechless.
Because they are treacherous. They are traitors. I mean, I don't know how to emphasize that even more. They are traitors to the very people that elected them. They're not conservative. They're all the same, forwarding the same agenda. You know that I am the only and the first ever to be charged with that offense under the Defense Act. I mean, they have chosen a sermon of a pastor. What did I say again to the people? Well, I reminded the villains about God, that our God is bigger than their God. They hate that stuff. Remember, fascists, communists, socialists, tyrants, they hate accountability. They want to pillage, they want to murder, they want to rape, they want to steal. And when you tell them that there is a reckoning coming, that one day they're going to be facing the living God and they will pay for what they have done to other people, while they hate that, they want to remove any reference of that powerful God that one day is going to judge the living and the dead. And then reminding them, think about this. I reminded the villains of today what happened to the villains 40 years before. I've told them about solidarity movement. I've told the Canadians how we can beat the villains of today easy. So refuse to work for them. Just walk out of your jobs. I'm telling you, if millions of Canadians would just simply walk out of their jobs, it would paralyze their system and the system would collapse and we would have our rights within the same day or the same week back. It's so simple. It's so easy. I watched that with my own eyes, and that was the message. That was the heart of the message. You people, you Canadians, you Albertans, you have the power. You got that power. Don't believe that just because they got guns and swords and they got the tongues that they are more powerful than you. No, there is more of us than of them. If we unite together in solidarity, and walk out of jobs and start, dealing only with each other outside of their corrupted system, it collapses the system and we get our freedoms back. It's so easy, and yet it's so hard to make people, to understand that, because they always look for some easy way out of trouble. So when Danielle is running and she talks the talk, and I have to admit, she talks the talk, she's giving amazing speeches, she's highly intelligent, and deep inside, I believe she's not an totally evil woman. I mean, Rachel Notley, she is evil to the core. She's evil in her heart, in her mind, in her spirit, and in her body. She's evil. Danielle Smith, I don't think she's evil. I think she's lost. She's a lost human being. She's a lost soul, and she just wants to be liked. And unfortunately, she wants to be liked by the devil, and she wants to be liked by God. You cannot have both ways. So maybe deep inside, she wants to do what's right. However, by appointing the villains, the Nazis, back into the power, it paralyzed her ability to do what's right. So now she's in trouble. Now she's being ruled and she's controlled by the Gestapo of yesterday, the Gestapo of Jason Kenney. So we are in trouble because people want an easy way out. When you listen to the lying politicians juggling for you, having two hats, one hat on Sunday, I'm a good person, I'm a Christian, and another hat for the rest of the week, I'm a devil, and I am in bed with the globalist agenda. You can have both ways, but because people are lazy, they're super comfortable, they don't like to rock the boat, they don't like to do anything, they just want someone to fix their problems. That's why we are in this trouble. We have to change our mentality, and we have to start voting a totally different individuals into the places of power, because if we don't, the villains of today will keep pillaging. The villains, those politicians are like cancer. And here's what I know about cancer. Cancer spreads. Cancer never stops. Cancer is never satisfied. They're like greedy dogs. What you need to do with the cancer, you need to cut it out. You have to cut it out. If you don't remove those people from those places of power, they will eventually destroy you. They'll finish you off.
Well said. And the solidarity movement is a great example of what actually works. The trucker convoy was a good example of that. And even, you were saying all it takes is enough people to just stand up and say no. And a great example is this happened in specific workplaces during COVID. If enough workers said, hey, we don't want to do the vax thing or else we're all going to leave, then the employer was like, I guess you know what? I guess if you're all standing up and saying no, I guess we're not going to do it. That's just like a small example, and if we can extrapolate that to the entire country, hopefully it can give more people the bravery and the courage to stand up and say no. But I do want to go back to the solidarity movement in Poland when it comes to controlled opposition. Like, did you see a lot of fakers back then? I know it's like a kind of a long saga of communist Poland, but is there any kind of examples you can provide, maybe specifically to the solidarity movement in like the union workers and this sort of thing? Were there examples of controlled opposition, and how did the Poles overcome this or navigate that?
Of course, every movement, including our own movement here, will have traitors within the movement, controlled opposition, people that are pretending to be good, but they are not good. I mean, Coutts Border is a perfect example. And when I was there, I told them because I could feel it, I could smell it. I said to them, you have operatives here. And I don't know if they're from CCs or they are RCMP officers, but you have traitors here. You have people that want to hurt you here, and they're going to lie. They're going to do something to you to hurt you because the government is scared of unified movement. Like we saw, over 1 million Canadians came together in solidarity with each other. That's power, and the government got scared. So they're going to lie. They're going to do all kinds of evil against you to stop this from happening. Poland was not immune. We had traitors. We had people that were infiltrating the freedom movement. But here is what it killed the opposition, it was more of us than of them. Simply, there was millions of Poles that would not put up with this. And the voice of the people that wanted freedom was bigger and stronger than the voice of the controlled opposition. You know what's right now is happening around me in this time? The gossip, the slander. You know what they're accusing me right now? They're accusing me that I kidnapped my wife when she was 7 and married her when she was 15. And it was like nonsense. We are the same age. We've met when I was 20. She was 19. We are 6 months apart, but the same year. We were both born 1973.
And sorry to cut you off. Is this kind of just random gossip? Is this published somewhere? Like how do these rumors come about? Where do they come from? Do you know?
Yeah, social networks. They're being sent everywhere, right? To cause, concern, to put the gossip,
to make the public not support you anymore, because they'll see, he's a bad guy, I'm not going to support him anymore. Yeah.
That's right. And the nonsense is unbelievable. For example, I was a very successful businessman. I used to own 7 houses. I owned properties, acreages. I never hid it that I was very successful. I was a millionaire. I was driving sport cars. I was having office in Bankers Hall. I used to own a media outlet, a magazine. I was never hiding that. I mean, since when being successful is something that you should be ashamed of? But somehow they're saying, he owns 3 houses next to each other. Yeah, I turned one into a kitchen, another one into a storehouse, and I live in a third one. I never hid that, but somehow that's a bad thing, right? They are claiming that, I married my wife when she was child. That was my child bride. I mean, nonsense like this for one purpose, because you have controlled opposition that is afraid. They have a job, they have an agenda. In Poland was the same thing. They were trying to spread rumors about the leadership of the Solidarity Party, or this guy is bad, this guy works for the Soviets, this guy, this is nothing new under the sun. The Bible says it's the same tactics. They need to destroy the unity of the movement when they fear the movement. In Poland was identical, the same thing, but with more of us, more of good people that knew better. If you want to believe that I married my wife when she was a child, you're plain stupid, because you can ask me, or you can come and my wife will show you a driver's license of her date of birth. But if you believe in that nonsense, then you're stupid and you deserve the government you have. But that's the tactics of the operatives that are trying to discredit leaders in the country, people that they fear. And believe me, 16 arrests, over 100 court cases, 340 citations are loud and clear. They are afraid of someone like me. I think I broke some kind of a Guinness Book record of getting tickets on earth. I've never met a man that had more tickets given to him. And of course, the tickets were for me being a pastor. So that tells you everything, that they will spread rumor, they will spread gossip, they will attack you, they will try to stop you. Danielle Smith tried to bribe me. I had a number of times the UCP government under her leadership coming to me, offering, the latest one was, if you cross the floor, if you come to us, abandoning the people that elected me to represent them, if I do what she did years ago, then I will receive a guaranteed seat at the legislature. My answer was very, very simple and very quick. I am not a whore of Babylon. I do not cross floors. I do not abandon my people. I'm not Judas Iscariot. I'm a pastor. I am a very faithful man. I stand with my friends. I do not flip-flop because of the politics or money. The government offered me $2 million bribery if I stop doing what I'm doing. I'm not for sale. I was bought by the precious blood of Jesus. My Jesus already bought me. Therefore, you cannot have me. You cannot buy me. I'm already bought. And I vowed that if elected, I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing, which is clean the house, bring back accountability, checks and balances, elect judges, elect chief of police, elect constitutional sheriffs, do a reformation within the healthcare system, within the educational system, and bring our own police force. That right now the RCMP is acting like a private muscle and mafia gangsters for Justin Trudeau Castro. Albertans deserve their own police. Alberta's rangers, as I call them, that will actually work for the people. Imagine that. Imagine a police force that actually serves and protects the people that pay their salary.
Imagine.
Would that be a day? Would that be a day?
Absolutely. And just to go back to what you were saying about all the slander and the misinformation and the gossip, it's really funny because they're trying to smear your character, and they always kind of overlook you feeding the homeless for 2 decades in Calgary. Like, oh, this person's character is awful. It's like, yeah, well, I did feed the homeless for 2 decades in Calgary. You're not going to look at that. You don't care about that when defining my character. Okay, very interesting.
Well, but the newest gossip is that I'm doing this to get rich, and if you have ever seen us feeding the homeless, we never charge a penny from the homeless people. We are all volunteers. We all the whole organization runs on private donations and donations from companies that donate food. We all operate on the notion of the Bible that God says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation, feed the poor, take care of the orphans and the widows. And people, I have the best volunteers you can possibly have. Those people don't want anything in return. They just do this because they love other humans. And I was called a person that works for Soros. I was accused of working for Pope. I was accused of being a Russian spy. I was accused of working for Mossad. I was accused of being founded by Soros and Schwab. I mean, those people are insane, but you got to remember, they're doing this for a purpose. There is a goal in the end. There is agenda. Yeah. The agenda is they're afraid of someone that can make a difference for the people. So they need to smear him. They need to attack him. I'm feeding the homeless. I'm taking care of the homeless people for the past 24 years. That's a deep cover up. If I'm the bad guy,
you're committed. You're really committed to your cover up. Yeah.
And I don't want anything in return. You know what I said when I was elected, the leader of this party? I said I am giving up my salary if elected as the next premier or MLA, whatever. If I'm going to be elected, I am giving up my salary. I'm content with what I have. I don't need people's money. I don't need, taxpayers' money. I will donate all of that salary back into feeding the homeless people. And what I said to people at the very beginning, I will never stop being pastor. That's what I want to do. That's my passion. That's my life. And I said to the people in the party, if you want me, you got to remember, I'm not schizophrenic. I'm not a hypocrite like the rest of them. I am first and most a pastor. I'll keep my church. I'll keep preaching the gospel. And then during the week, I'll do my best to fix this broken system. And I refuse to take a salary. I'll donate my salary to the homeless people. And I did it on purpose because I want people to see that it's possible to be a politician, not for money or power or, title and all those crazy things that people are willing to die for, they're willing to give up their souls for. You can actually be a politician that will serve the people, a true servant. Is that not what the politician was always all about, to be a servant of the people that elected them? You know what a minister means? Minister, the word minister means servant. Prime minister means the first servant. Look how far we have fallen in our beloved Canada.
And on that note, we gotta look at this because it's speaking of how far Canada's fallen. This is Josh Alexander. This is Josh Alexander getting thrown in a cop car. He was first suspended for his political views from his Catholic high school, essentially saying that there's only 2 different genders. And then he was protesting in Ottawa outside of a drag time story hour. And here he is getting arrested again, picked on again, really, just for who he is and what he believes in, which is, just being a Christian, really. And we have such a rich history in Canada of being Christian, but I'm sure there's a lot you have to say about this. But I kind of want to ask the question in regards to the story and in general, how big do you think this battle, how big of a role do you think Christianity does play in terms of trying to turn this country around?
Well, number one, without God, I would not be doing what I'm doing. I would be just simply terrified of being murdered. As you remember, when they locked me in metal cages, stripped naked, solitary confinement, psych ward, max spot, 5 different inmates already testified that they wanted to murder me in prison. The guards were giving them incentives to hurt me, to beat me, to murder me. So those people don't play fair. And all of that was in the name of the law and order. So without God, without my faith, I'm out of here. And I remember someone called me yesterday and said, well, you're the leader of a political party.Maybe you should tone down on your Christian beliefs. No, you take that away. I have nothing to do here. If you will not allow me to fight in a spiritual realm, to bring God of sanity back into this realm, the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. I want my children to live in a free country. And the only way we can achieve that is by inviting God of freedom back into our country. Canada was built on the Word of God. Peace Tower with scriptures, our national anthem, God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for the name of our nation, Dominion of Canada. Canada is not Canada. The name is Dominion of Canada. That's the proper name, which we ditched. It was Dominion Day, not Canada Day, because that's not the proper name. From sea to sea, right? Our code of armor, everywhere you look, including Alberta, in our code of armor, it says, our motto, it says strong and free. We've lost all of that, but this nation was built on Judeo-Christian values. And then people hated it. Some evil, wicked, globalist devils hated it. So they started to eliminate that heritage from our nation. But if you do not know where you came from, you do not know where you're heading. And if it comes to the genders, I disagree with Josh. I believe that there are 3 genders. I truly believe there are only 3 genders, not 2. There are 3. There is male, female, and stupid. Besides that, I don't see any other gender. It's ridiculous to say that we have 100 or 1,000 different fluid genders. So if I feel, okay, so let's go like this. Okay, let's follow their way of thinking. So I feel like Premier of Alberta. I want office of the legislature.
Well, if that's how you feel, then I guess I need to respect that.
I feel as a Premier of Alberta, Daniel, please step down, because if you don't, you're hurting my feelings, and you could be arrested for that. Is that not what Josh did? He hurt some crazy, psychopathic, perverted people's feelings. And he had, we're living in a country that those liars in the political realm are telling us that we are living in a country of law and order, that everyone is treated equally, right? Well, no, because Josh, and of course me hundreds of times, but Josh right now is just proving to the whole world that you got 2 categories of people. You got the perverts and the elites that can say and do whatever they want. Justin Trudeau can come on television and mock my faith. He can mock my Jesus. And yet, this young fella cannot stand against perversion, standing on his beliefs. That's insanity. That's corruption. That's tyranny. That's dictatorship. That's exactly what I remember growing up under communist dictatorship. That's exactly what my grandparents told me, how life was under the Nazi, under the fascism. This is a hybrid, a combination of fascism, communism, and socialism. So Josh, take it or leave it. Believe the way he believes or not. That's not the point. The point is that this kid has a right to be different than another person and to believe differently. If the homosexuals can have their corrupted flags and their ideology and left and right, why can't I have mine? After all, we are all saying that we have charter rights and freedoms, and we are under the Constitution. And yet, of course, in practice, that's not the case. It's shocking, and we are watching this in front of our eyes. I'll tell you this: if elected, if God will do a miracle, and people will finally start seeing what I'm trying to tell them and elect me as their leader, I will turn Alberta into a sanctuary of freedom, sanctuary of guns, where you will be able to defend yourself, a castle defense. I'll bring back into this land. You will be able to be protected if you are a law-abiding, respectful gun owner. You should have a right protected by the government to protect your livestock. When you're living in a rural Alberta, and when you call for the police, it takes sometimes an hour for them to come. When a villain comes into your property, he comes with intent. You should be able to protect your loved ones, your wives and your daughters from rapists. Why do we penalize the victims while going after the villains? I don't get it. I don't understand. Are Albertans okay with that? Because I'm not. This will be a sanctuary province where freedoms will be cherished and more protected by the government.
I love the sound of that. We're going to wrap it up real soon here, but I do want to ask you another question when it comes to Christianity and having faith. But first, I'm going to play a clip from your interview with Rebel News right after you got out of jail. And you kind of shared a very touching story about how even in jail, amongst murderers, amongst people who have done heinous things, you were still able to kind of give some solace to these people who have been kind of cast aside with the gospel and with the Bible and Jesus Christ. So let me just play that clip right now.
By the time I was transferred, a few days later, I had 5 people at my Bible studies. I prayed with multiple inmates. And believe it or not, inmates were starting to come to me for blessings and just talk to me. And they were waiting for me to come out of my cell. So again, in the words of the inmates here, one guy, actually few of them, but one that really touched me, I wanted to cry. He says, Art, we need you here. I know you want to go home, but I was praying that God would keep you here for a few more days, just for us. And that's why it was so emotional for me, because I understood that the life without hope and anyone that actually directing you to hope is hell. That's actually what it is. A life without hope is hell.
Very powerful stuff. And, for me personally, I see something like that, and it's an example of how powerful, Christianity can be for people in the worst possible moment. And I feel like in Canada, as people who care about freedom, it feels like the worst possible moment. I've personally, out of desperation, come to Christ. I wouldn't say I was a Christian a few years ago, but over the chaos over the past 3 years, it started to seem like the only thing that made sense. So to wrap it up, Artur, do you have any words for freedom fighters, for conservatives, for people watching who may feel unsure about opening themselves up to Christianity or having more faith in their lives? Do you have any advice or any words to say to these people?
When I would say to you that Jesus Christ was the biggest and the most powerful freedom fighter that ever walked on this side of eternity. Jesus died for our freedom. It says, who comes to me is free indeed. And like I said before, I would not be doing what I'm doing. I will be terrified. What happened in the past few years, the globalists, those evil, demon-possessed people spread the blanket of terror all over the world. What we need courageous men and women that will spread the message of hope, the message of tomorrow all over the world. And you cannot do that unless you yourself are filled with hope. In that prison, I was able to be hope for them because I had hope in my own heart. many of them lost hope. I remember those boys crying, and I remember this one time a number of them would come to me to my cell door and says, I want Jesus. I want your Jesus. I want to receive him as my Lord and Savior. And I would lead them to the Lord, and the tears. And we're talking about tough criminals. I was sitting with the worst of the worst, bank robbers, which, by the way, they still call me to this day. And the Bible study that I started in prison continues every night.
That's awesome.
To this day. So a year later, I was sitting with murderers. I was sitting with human traffickers, drug traffickers. So they were not gangsters, gang members. They were not just, little criminals. They were hardcore criminals. And tears were coming. I remember this one guy. He was cut here, tattoos everywhere, scary looking guy. And he comes to my cell. I was locked like an animal. I was not allowed to leave my cell. And he would do something like this, and he says, thank you. You restored my hope in humanity. And he started to cry. I mean, those things, you can't make them up. It's so powerful. It's amazing. So I would say to you, come to God, come to Jesus. I mean, he loves you. He died for you. He rose from the grave. And I'm telling you, this is a fight. What we're witnessing right now is a war between good versus evil. And you see evil everywhere. At the Grammy Awards, look, he played a devil. It's evil. The evil is in our face. Everywhere we look, you will not succeed unless you are counterattack that evil with good. And who is good? God is good. He will give you the strength to overcome that evil. He is going to give you hope. He's going to protect you and lead you. He will give you wisdom and the power to do what's right. So instead of running away from God, run towards God, because he loves you. He is this Father that is waiting for you to come back to the Father's house. And like I said before, I can't imagine doing what I do without the support of my faith, without the support of my God. I would be scared. I would be scared to death. But you don't see me scared. I joke, a lot. I sleep like a baby. I don't have nightmares. I don't have, what is going to happen? That's it. My life is over. Why? Because my God is bigger than their God.
Right. And you put on the full armor of Christ, and it's incredible what you can accomplish with just that. You're in jail, and you're helping give hope to the completely hopeless and forgotten and cast aside. But that's gonna about do it for us tonight. But just to add to it, actually, one thing: imagine one real Christian in the House of Commons. How much that would change things. Okay. For those doubting, that would be so amazing to have an actual Christian standing by their values anywhere, on any municipal, provincial, federal. That would be so fantastic to see. And imagine we had the entire House of Commons like that. That could turn this country around. Is there any last words before we go, Pastor Pawlowski?
On that note, I promise you, my wife says, do not promise anything because you will sound like the rest of those snakes. But I'm telling you, there's certain things that I want to promise you. And this I promise you. If elected to lead this province of ours, this beloved Alberta, I'm going to reinstate the prayer. That will be the first thing I will do at the legislature. I'll bring back prayer for the whole world to hear. So that's what I will do. And I believe that after that, God is going to give us the strength and the power to start the cleanup job.
Fantastic. Artur Pawlowski, thank you so much for coming on the show, Controlled Opposition. For your ongoing legal battle, you can go to streetchurch.ca, or you can even send a direct e-transfer to Artur Pawlowski at art@streetchurch.ca. Did I get that correct?
Yes, art@streetchurch.ca. Yeah.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you wanted to plug before we go?
Just God bless you. And remember, we already won. The enemy just doesn't know it yet.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. We're going to talk to you next week. And, of course, thank you again, Pastor Artur Pawlowski, for coming on the show. And finally, it is okay to demand higher standards.